Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the webinar on Candy's Post Tender Escalation. My name is Johan Stein, and I'm a technical consultant at CCS. It is my pleasure to present this webinar to you. Today, I will be showing you how to use Candy's Post Tender Escalation functionality. We will commence with the basics in order to ensure that everyone is of a fairly similar understanding, as we then go through to some more of the advanced functionality. Due to the large number of people logged onto this webinar, we will not be able to answer any questions during the webinar. However, please submit your questions during the session with the provided function on screen. At the end of the webinar, we will collate these questions and send the answers to everybody that's registered for the webinar via email. Please note that the webinar will be recorded and you will receive a link to watch at your own leisure. There's a webinar once a month on various Candy topics. So should you not be able to attend the webinar at the given time frame, then please still register for the webinar, as this will entitle you to receive a recorded copy of the webinar. Let's get started. Alright, so Candy's post-tender escalation. Escalation claims on your valuation may be calculated on a monthly basis using either the building type escalation, our Haylett formula, or civil type escalation, our Baxter, where you have up to 3 formulas. Now, if we first have a look at our building escalation formula, it says that the principal agent shall calculate an adjustment amount for each valuation period in respect for each work group by the application of the following formula. So where A is the adjusted amount, 0.85 is our constant, which provides for a 15% non-adjustable element. V is the work value in such work group and the valuation period. XE is the value of the index applicable to such work group and the valuation period for the calendar month during which the payment certificate is dated. Then XO, the value of the index applicable to such work group for the base month. Then if we have a look at our civil escalation formula, you'll see X is our fixed portion. Unless otherwise stated, it's normally 10% or 0.1. Then the letters A, B, C, and D is our coefficients, which is contained in the contract and should always equal to 100%. Then L is our labor index, P is our plant index, M is our material index, and F is our fuel index. The suffix O is our price index for labor, plant, material, and fuel. And then the suffix T is the current or the month indices for labor, plant, material, and fuel. Now, these are the formulas that's used in Candy's calculation of the escalation types. Alright, so before we get started with this webinar, please note that what we'll be sharing today is only applicable in the South African market. In the rest of the world, escalation is dealt with in different formats. So the job that I'm using already contains selling rates, and we've also cleared any unused codes in these jobs. So let's have a look at our first one, which is our building type escalation. So I'm going to open up my job. Make sure I'm in the valuations application. And then I'll click on the menu main. So firstly, I'll have to go and set up my initial valuation setup. I'm going to leave it on the 20th of February. And I'm going to give it a valuation title of Valuation 1. Valuation number 1. Click on OK. Alright, then I'm going to do a quick valuation. So I'll click on my V icon or my V tool button. Right, I will then firstly copy my bill quantity to my final quantity to ensure that I have an anticipated final quantity in place. So I would right click on my final quantity header, copy from selected quantity, and select bill quantity to be my source. Now I can go ahead and enter my actual and claim quantities for this month's valuation. For our example, I'm going to use the actual percentage final column and go and update the bill items with 35%. So I'm going to right click on my actual percentage final column, apply the percentage, and allocate 35%. Alright, and there I've updated my claimed and actual quantities for this month. Now just to go and show you, I'll just quickly calculate. I'll close this document, and then I want to go and do a trade totals display, which is the pie chart tool button. If I click on that tool button, I'm going to base my display on my claimed quantity and on my selling rate. Click on OK. You'll see there I have a value of 1.8 million, and you'll see that value once again when I print my escalation report. I'm going to close this document. So my next step would be to go and define or specify the type of escalation for this document. So I'll click on my advanced menu, then click on the one that says select escalation type. So when accessing the escalation menu for the first time, the escalation set selector is displayed. This selector controls the setting up of my escalation file. So firstly, the escalation type option is used to create escalation file for the use of civil engineering type of escalation or my building type escalation. The quantities option is used to create the escalation file either on the main bill of quantities or on the area bill of quantities. Then the escalation calculation can be either on the selling rate or on the gross rate of this job. I will select building and then click on OK. Next up, I have to go and define my work group codes for my base indices. So I'll click on the menu advanced. You'll now see my building escalation option has been highlighted, and I'm going to select the first option, my work group definitions. So I can now go and enter my work group codes, descriptions, and the base values. Just note, a work group is a grouping of work descriptions that are more commonly undertaken by a particular recognized tradesman, or that are generally recognized in the construction industry as sharing common characteristics, and for which an index is available. Also note that the base is taken on the calendar month during which the tenders close. Let's go and define some work group codes there. So my first one is going to be 104, which is earthworks. My base is 509.7. Then 110 for concrete. With a base of 680.1. Then 11111 for my formwork. A base of 535.1. Then my reinforcement 114. And a base of 592.8. Then 118 for masonry. My base index there is 566.2. And then lastly, my waterproofing 120 with a base of 802.2. Right, you'll see the group code is 4 characters alphanumeric in length, and the work group definitions document will allow me to enter up to 40 different work group codes, their descriptions, and the base index for this job. I would close this document. Then my next step is going to be to go and allocate these codes to my bill price codes. So I would go to my document manager. Now I've already set up a document for this specific exercise. I'll just click on customize so that you can see the layout. And you'll see I've added column 6.10, my escalation code, to this document. Let's go and select that document. And now I'm going to allocate the escalation code to each of those price codes. So first off, we're going to start with our masonry, so which was the code 118. Then we have our concrete, which was 110. Then I have my earthworks, which was 104. Alright, now for my excavation keeping free of water, if a price code is not subject to escalation, it should not be marked as escalatable with a code, but should be marked by right-clicking on the appropriate block and selecting Mark as non-escalatable. Mark it with an asterisk. So for that specific price code, I'm going to right-click on that specific block, the cell, and then mark it as non-escalatable. And you'll see it has marked it with an asterisk. The last one is also 104. Then I move on to my formwork. My formwork was 111. Then my reinforcing was 114. And lastly, my waterproofing was 120. If I'm done with that, I can just calculate, and then I can clear this document. My next step is going to be to enter my monthly indices. So I'll go to my menu Advanced, select Building Escalation, and then select Monthly Indices. Alright, so there you'll see is my work group codes that I've defined. Now I can go and enter my index for this month. Now Stats SA is used to get the monthly indices. So we're going to type in there 600 for earthworks. My concrete is going to be 670. Formwork is going to be 600. Reinforcing 600. Masonry 600. And my waterproofing 900. Right, so my escalation will then be calculated using the monthly indices in this document. I can also go and amend my header. If I click on Tools, you'll see I can amend the header. I can give it the month, so I'm going to specify Feb 2017. And you can also specify it as provisional or final. If you specify it as provisional, you can always come back and go and put in the correct indices for the month that was recalculated by Stats South Africa, and then you can switch it to final. This will help when you do your final accounts and you have to make sure that everything collates to one another. And you'll see at the top, then my header was amended. I'll close this document. My next step is to go and update the escalation values. So I'll click on Advanced, Building Escalation, and there's the option to go and update escalation value. Do I want to transfer the escalation data? I'll click on Yes. Now I get a warning message. Alright, and first you'll have to go and read and make sure you understand the warning message. It just tells us that there was an unescalated item encountered, and then also there's some zero selling rate that was encountered. If I'm happy and understand the warning message, I can click on OK. So please note the value for the unescalated price code will not be transferred. So let's now go and print a report to see our adjustment amount for this month's escalation. So I'll click on Advanced, Building Escalation, and then select the option Escalation Report. I'll select the month number for which I want to print it. Click on OK. And then preview this report. Right, if I zoom in a bit, you'll see there's my total for this job that I got when we did our trade totals display. And there you'll see on the right hand side I have a minus escalation to date. That just means that my base indices for this month was higher than my current indices was lower than my base for this month, so that's why I have the negative there. And then I have a total of 88,324.75 for this month. This document should also be added to the interim payment claim certificate, which would then be given to the client to approve. I can close this report. Right, so if I'm happy with that and I've done my escalation for this month, I can now go and set up my valuation for the next month. So before I explain this process, let's go and duplicate our job. So I'm going to go back to Candy, to my job manager. I'm going to duplicate valuation number 1. And rename it and call it valuation number 2. And access that job. I'll then go to my menu main, select my valuation setup manager. To display the amounts on the right hand side, I'll just have to click on calculate. Right, and now I can go and set up my next valuation by clicking on the next valuation button. It gives me the option to go and back up my valuation data. This would be preferred just to make sure that I have a backup of data in case something might happen to my machine. So I'll select yes. Then you have your 3 options to go and back up to your common, or to your archive, or just to a specific file. I'm just going to select backup to my common. Select compress the backup file. Click on OK. Right, now it comes up with my setup dialog box. And now I can go and specify the current or the quantity date for next valuation. That's going to be my next date for my valuation. It's going to be on the 20th of March. And I'm going to give it a valuation title number 2. And then I have to tick that box to transfer the escalation data. And then click on OK. Do I want to update escalation valuation? Click on yes. Again, it just tells me that there was an unescalated item and some 0 selling rates. And I can click on OK. Right, and there I've set up my valuation for the next month. Just to show you, if I open up my valuation bill, you'll see now I have some previous quantities that it has been populated by setting up my next valuation. So once the valuation is complete, I can repeat the previous steps to go and calculate the escalation for this month's valuation. So that was that for our building escalation. So I'm going to go back to my job manager. And now we're going to have a look at my civil type escalation. So I'm going to select that job. I'll click on my menu main. So firstly, I would have to go and set up an initial valuation. Again, I'm going to leave it on the 20th of February. And I'm going to give it a valuation title called Valuation Number 1. Again, I'm going to quickly do a valuation, so I'll open up my valuation bill. I'll make sure I have a final quantity in place, so I'd right-click on my final quantity column, copy from selected quantity, select my bill quantity as my source, and now I'll go and update my actual and my claimed quantities for this month as well. And again, I'll be using my actual percentage final column to go and apply 35% for this job. So apply percentage, 35%, click on OK. And now I've updated my actual and claimed quantity. Now I've just done this for the exercise of this webinar to save us some time. If I close this document, I'll go and do a valuation or trade totals display again based on my claimed quantity and my selling rate. And there you'll see my value again, 1.8 million, which is then based on my claimed quantity and my selling rate. And you'll see that value again once we print our escalation report for this month. I'll close that document. Now I have to go and select an escalation type for this job. So I'll click on my menu Advanced, click on Select Escalation Type. I'm going to keep it for this one on Civil, and then click on OK. Now I have to go and specify my Civil formula-based indices. So I'll click on my menu Advanced. Now you'll see my Civil Escalation menu has been highlighted. I would select Civil formula-based indices. And now I have up to 3 formulas to go and define. So we're going to select our first one, formula number 1. Now the reason we have 3 options there is to accommodate jobs with different disciplines. For an example, a job which includes civil works, bridges, and steel engineering works, where the civil and bridge bill items will be escalated using the CPA, the contract price adjustment formula, and the steel and engineering bill items will be escalated using our CEFSA formula. For this example, I'm just going to use my CPA, my contract price adjustment formula. So I'll select formula 1 and green tick that. So this selector presents a schematic display of a standard civil type formula. The fixed portion is entered as a percentage, so I'll firstly put in there 15%, and I'm going to give my formula the name CPA. Then the proportions of labor, plant, material, and fuel are entered as percentages, which the sum of this must be equal to 100%. Right, for each of these, you'll see that there are 2 possible indices, and the ratios must also be entered. If only one is applicable, I'll enter 1 against the first field, and then leave the second one blank. If my ratio is 1 to 2, I'll enter 1 against the first and 2 against the second. So let's go and specify our coefficients. So firstly, I'll look at labor. I'll put in there 35%. My base indices there for labor is going to be 220, and I'm only going to use that base indices, so I'll put in a weighting ratio of 1. Then my plant, so I'm going to use for my plant with a base index of 235 and a weighting ratio of 1. Then my material, I have it as 25 and 210 and a ratio of 1. And lastly, my fuel, going to have 10% and 240 with a weighting ratio of 1. Once I'm done with that, I can click OK. And now I'm going to allocate these formulas to the specific price codes that is needed. So again, I'll go to my document manager. I'll select the document that I've already set up. Select that document. And for this example, we're just going to use our CPA here. So I'm just going to allocate 1 to all the items, to all the price goods there. I'll press calculate. Again, also note that if price is subject to escalation, it should be marked as unescalatable by right-clicking on the appropriate cell or block and selecting mark as non-escalatable option, which will mark it with an asterisk. Once I'm done with this, I can close this document, and then I have to go and update my escalation value. So I'll click on Advanced, Civil Escalation, and Update Escalation Value. Again, it's asking me, do I want to transfer the escalation data, and I'll say yes. It just tells me that it's encountered as 0 selling rate. All right, so make sure you understand and read that message, and then click on OK. Next up, I'm going to specify my monthly indices. So I'll go to Advanced, Civil Escalation, and then Monthly Indices. So I'll select the formula that I'm going to work with and green tick that. Now it's giving me columns of labor, plant, material, and fuel. You'll see there's LA, LB, PA, PB, and so forth. So LA would mean if I have a base indices, I will type in there. If I have an alternative indices as well, I can use the B column to go and specify the alternative indices for this month as well. So it says then the monthly values for our indices are entered manually. Access is only available to columns that have been given a base index in the Civil Formula Base Indices document, like I said. Now let's go and enter the published monthly indices for this respective valuation. So for labor, I have 235. For my plant, I have 260. For my material, I have 235. And for my fuel, I have 270. And you'll see there is my valuation amount, the same amount that we saw on the trade totals display. And once I'm happy with that, I can click or close this document. The next step is that I can go and print my escalation report. So I'll click on the menu Advanced, Civil Escalation, and then click on Escalation Report. Select my formula, which is CPA, and then I can go and preview the specific report. So if you zoom in, you'll see at the top it gives me my different coefficients. It tells me the base indices that I have to find, and now it gives me my monthly indices as I typed them in. If I scroll to the right, you'll see there is my value, 1.8 million. That is the value for this valuation. And there is my CPA adjustment amount. Again, this document would be added with my interim payment claim for the client to approve. If I'm happy with this, I can close this document. Right, again, if I'm done with this first valuation, I can go back to my job manager, duplicate my job, and rename it and call it valuation number 2. So right-click, rename, and then give it the number 2 specification. Click on OK. Select that job. I would now go to the menu Main. Select the Setup Manager. To show the allowable amounts, I would click on Calculate. So there it shows me the amounts for valuation number 1. To go and set up the next valuation, I'll click on my next valuation button. It gives me the option to go and back up my valuation data. If I select yes, again I can back it up to a common to an archive or to a specific file. Let's select Common, compress the data, and click on OK. Alright, just to make sure, I'll go and change my quantity date to be the 20th of March. I'll give it a valuation number 2 title, and I'll make sure I transfer my escalation data to valuation number 2. Click on OK. You'll see now it's set up valuation number 2. Click on Yes. Again, it just gives me a warning that there's some zero selling rates involved. If I'm happy with that and understand the message, I'll click on OK. And there's my valuation 2. Now I can go and capture my quantities again for this month and then repeat the previous steps to calculate my escalation for this specific month. So that was that for my civil escalation. I'm going to go back to my job manager, and then we're going to touch on escalation in cost and allowables. So I'm going to select my job that I've set up for this specific exercise. Right, so this escalation also needs to be entered manually by the user in the definitions and settings menu, which is my blue hammer. Alright, so I'll click on my definitions and settings tool button. I'll make sure I have 4.1 cost codes, ledger codes selected. Right, so now escalation is done here at a cost code level. Please note that our cost codes are used to summarize similar simple resources together for comparison to the accounting system's cost or ledger codes. Alright, so next up, the user has now to decide and enter an escalation percentage to date, which is for the work done, then an escalation percentage to the end for work which is still remaining. For our exercise, we are going to look at the cost code fuel. So there is at fuel 400, and we're going to have a 10% escalation to date and a 20% escalation to end. Once I've typed that in, I can click on OK. So once entered, the result will be displayed in document 2.4 in cost and allowables. So I'll go to the application cost and allowables, open up the document manager, and select document 2.4. So here I would see now my allowable to date. I'll also see the escalated allowable to date, and then the variance of these two allowables. So if we look at our fuel, we'll see there is our to date allowable coming from our actual quantity in the valuation application. And then I have my to date escalated amount, and the variance between them is 7,397. I'm going to leave this document open to the top half of my screen. Now, this to date escalated allowable can also be compared to the real cost as imported from the accounting system. This comparison can be done by viewing document 2.1 in cost and allowables. So I'll go to my document manager, select document 2.1, and size that to the bottom half of my screen. Right, so you'll see on document 2.1, there is my to-date escalated amount, my to-date escalated allowable, and you'll see there is my 81,365 for fuel, which is exactly the same as the document above. Now I can pull through my cost to date coming from my accounting package in cost and allowables, and then I can view my escalated to date allowable against my to date cost coming from my accounting package. I'll clear my screen, And that brings us to the end of this webinar. So thank you for your time, and I trust that you now have a greater insight into Candy's post-tender escalation functionalities. Please remember to email your local CCS office if you want to know more about post-tender escalation. We will keep you informed on the next webinar, and remember that if you're still unable to join the selected time, please still register and you'll receive the recording, which you can then watch at your own time. Enjoy the rest of your day until the next webinar. Goodbye for now.